I want to go to the moment in the debate, and you probably know what moment that is. So, you had found a video where Mark had suggested implicitly that if you gave a child a KJV, it would be sinful. So, what did you think? What did you think of his response? Let me just ask it that way. What did you think of his response during the debate, and maybe even afterwards? I know you guys probably talked a lot about that, given the controversy it
A
stirred up.
little bit, a little bit. Honestly, that was the point I was getting to in the debate, and it was at the very end, and it is why some people think that I won the debate. It
Hmm.
was a debate tactic to set him up. Some people don't, and some people think it was miserable. I get that. I don't
Yeah,
really
yeah,
care. It's fine. But for fun, I wanted to. And I hate saying this. People don't like the fact that I enjoy this, but I
sure.
enjoy this. Okay, I enjoy
Okay.
talking about this.
Yeah,
So and pardon me for using the word fun in conjunction with the Bible, but anyway, be that as it may,
sure.
uh, I enjoyed it, and I was setting him up to get to that point, and I felt like when he responded, he wasn't expecting to have to defend that in front of a KJV crowd.
Hmm.
And I think when he thought through it and he had the scripture verses to back his point, I think he doubled down on it. And afterwards, he has debated, he was like trying to figure out, should I walk that back or not? And I think
Hmm.
he can't walk it back because if he walks it back, he concedes the debate. And
Oh, I
so
see.
he doesn't want to walk it back. And so he wants to double down on it. And I think I also, in this last conversation I had with him, um, I think this was the one that was recorded. We, I pointed out the fact that his goal, Mark's goal, is actually to get the King
Hmm.
James Bible
Hmm.
off of platforms, out of colleges
Right.
and institutions, put it on the shelf where Tyndale, beside Tyndale.
Hmm.
That he wants the KJV to find a revered, honored place beside the Geneva, the Tyndale, the Wycliffe, and all that. That's what he
Right.
wants.
Yeah, and he's been
And
explicit about that too, right?
yeah,
He's not hiding that. I know some people
no,
have accused him of lying, but he's been very open about what
that's
his
his goal.
his end goal is. Yeah.
And I think I think he's wrong about that.
Yeah.
Um, but that is his goal. And he thinks that he has a biblical standing for that. And I respect that. Okay. But his reaction afterwards, I think, you know, he doesn't want to re-articulate it. He kind of directs everybody back to what he said,
Yeah.
because what he said, to whom that knoweth to do good doeth it not to him in his sin. And is it really a good thing to give your child an unintelligible Bible? Well, I would agree. I would agree with this point. If his use of 1 Corinthians 14,
Uh-huh.
um, if I were to say to my son, look, you need to use the German Bible, Luther's translation. This is the correct one. And I
Right.
would give him Luther's translation, not teach him German. That would be wrong,
Hmm.
right? When I have an English translation. Okay. So 1 Corinthians 14 was the verse he was using. It
Yeah.
has to be intelligible. And that's 1 Corinthians 14 is talking about that. If you're using a different language, why are you using a different language, right?
Yep.
That's
Yep.
what he's saying. And
I mean,
so to that point, I would
as a
agree with that
Pentecostal
point.
as a Pentecostal pastor, I have a little bit of a different understanding of First Corinthians 14, right? Uh,
Okay. Well, that's
but
fun. That sounds like fun
yeah,
discussion.
yeah, yeah. That
All
that that
right.
would be.
Yeah.
But
I have a good friend that's a pastor of Trinity Holiness, and
okay, okay,
he and I have differences on that, and I
yeah,
respect him, and he and I
sure,
have
sure.
traveled abroad together.
Yeah, I'm
Believe
not
it or not.
oneness, right? People conflate oneness. I'm not oneness.
Yeah.
We believe the Trinity. We're mostly Orthodox, mostly,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
according to you
So
guys.
so I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah.
I think he understands how it came across, and that's why he's struggling to really re-articulate it, because he doesn't really want to say,
Hmm.
when someone gives their child a King James Bible, it's sin. But he's trying to say to us, if it's unintelligible, is it really a good thing to do? And I would agree with that point. if it's unintelligible, my argument in the debate is it's not that unintelligible,
Right, right.
which he conceded that point.
Yeah, right.
If you remember, he said that.
Hmm.
So that means his statement that it's sin is not. It's not sin. And I'm not sure if he actually came right out and said it's sin. He just kind of left it hang there and let you
Yeah,
draw your own conclusions.
right, right. Yeah,
But he was definitely pointing that direction.
in the discussion that I had with him that released earlier this week, it's Wednesday. Was it
Mm-hmm.
last week? No, it was this week. Yeah. He basically said that his mother gave him a King James version, and he hasn't called her to repent. So there's an
Right,
implication there. He hasn't said it specifically, but there's an implication there, and I don't want to read into his implication. I'll let the viewers
right,
do that.
right.
But
Did that answer
yeah,
your
so
question?
yeah, so I just picture in my mind, right? We started off the debate with Mark steamrolling you, but you sat up and you got one last shot off, which was the KJV child thing, and that kind of, because I mean, when everybody thinks of this debate now, all everybody can think about is Mark Ward saying the KJV is it's sinful to give it to the child. So I guess in that
And that
sense,
the question about steamrolling me.
yeah.
So I've heard this a lot. How do you think he steamrolled me? I'm just curious.
Um, what I found that this is how I would have went to the debate as somebody who's not a King James version only, but if I was to defend the proposition, I probably would have interacted with the false friends a lot more. I would have picked out a couple examples of what he's called false friends and maybe show from a number of sources how they're not false friends. I know a number of people are doing that now, actually, that I've seen a few articles from some
All right.
people. I would have questioned the results of the test. I would have asked about any bias or any sort of like that. This is how I would have done the debate. But if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong. So you're here. I don't want to misrepresent you. That's one
No,
thing I
that's
definitely
okay.
don't want to do. But it seemed to me that you were more prepared to talk about the textual issue rather than the readability issue. Am I
No,
right in that assessment?
no, not at all. I wasn't even interested in talking about the text. We were talking about readability, and the thing I was trying to do was give him respect and deference and let
Hmm.
him say what he wanted to say so
Right.
that I knew exactly where he was after. And we could have, I only, the only, because of time, there was only one word that I could pick on, which was study. And
Hmm.
that's the one I went after. And interestingly enough, that's not what everyone wants to talk about.
Right.
So to your point, I could have done that, and I knew if I did that, if I went point for point, tit for tat, then what would happen was everybody would their eyes would glaze over and they would lose the point.
Right.
And so that's why I didn't do that. And I wanted to give him the opportunity to say what he wanted to say. And people are saying, well, you shouldn't do that. Well,
Hmm.
yes,
It's
you
a
should.
debate. You have to. Yeah.
You
Yeah. That's
should.
part of
You
the
should
rules of.
give if you're having a conversation with someone and you want to debate them, you actually want to debate what they're actually saying, not what you think they're saying.
Right.
And so what I tried to do was give all these KJVO guys as much material to work with as possible. Because Mark was saying, this is my one shot. This is the only time I'm going to do this. And so I'm like,
Right.
okay, let's see if we can give him as much opportunity to say, and it's happening. I mean, online, if you look at the fallout, the result online is there's more conversations. Because a year ago, um, or more. I was on the Ministry Connection community or something. It's been a while back,
Hmm.
and something was said about the versions, and they shut it down. Administration did, so or somebody
Right.
did. No, we're not talking about versions on here. This is all a nasty
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, I was disappointed with them because I thought, well, hey, we ought to be able to have conversations in a ministry circle without everybody losing their shirts.
Right.
Hello, we ought to be able to if pastors can't talk about it, who can?
Right.
And so I was disappointed with that, and I kind of, stopped. I kind of withdrew a little bit from the Ministry Connection community because I thought, well, if you guys aren't willing, and to be truthful and honest, those guys had an agenda, and
Hmm.
I re-understood what their agenda was, and I backed off and said, okay, that's your agenda. That's cool. I understand. I
Right.
misunderstood what your agenda was. And so I get it. It was just about more about practical helps and those kinds of things. And they really want to get into theological discussions. And there
Right.
are other forums for that, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yep. Yep.
but what I've seen online is this increase, and I say hundreds and hundreds of posts that where people are now feeling emboldened to present their opinions. And I'm
Right.
like, great. This is what needed to happen. So,
Sure. That's good. Yeah, interesting. You talk about the how we don't debate. We don't want to debate that. And it was a sentiment that I've noticed amongst a number of King James Version people who would identify as King James Version onlyist. Not everyone, right? I want to be clear because I have a lot of King James Version only friends that I
mhm.
admire and respect. I'll name a couple just because I want them to know I love you guys. Brian Ross, Nick Sayers, Christopher Yetzer. These are
Mhm.
great guys, and if you want to have a King James version only discussion, you talk with these
Mhm.
guys, right? Because they're smart, they know what they're talking about, they've studied the issues, they
Sure.
understand. But in a number of other circles, there's this propensity to say, well, we don't talk about that. We there's no room for debate in the King James version discussion, so we're just going to shut down the conversation and that's it. We don't do that. So yeah, I recognize the sentiment there that you see. So let's move on. Kind of coming back to where we were at the start of this conversation is for me, the more important part of the conversation is less the readability, and more the textual question.
Well, sure.
So I'm a Byzantine priority guy, and so I
Okay.
find I find a number of issues with the critical text,
Right.
and I know some people don't like the term critical text. I don't understand. It's a great way to segment the, but anyway,
Right.
so I think there's a number of passages missing. So to give you an idea of the
Right.
Byzantine and the TR, right? I'm going through those 16 verses from the KJV that aren't in the critical text, and I'm looking at it from a Byzantine text perspective. And I think 11
Sure.
of them are there's a tremendous certainty around 11 of them. So for the most part, they're not exactly the same, but for the most part, the Byzantine and the TR are the same. So the question that I want to pose to you with that big preamble is this: would you consider doing a debate on the textual issue with Mark?
Well, uh, if he wants to, if anyone, I would be happy to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, to be
The
fair, I don't
text,
think Mark would. I'm just posing this as a
no,
theoretical at this point.
no,
Yeah.
I don't think so either. I mean, he and his problem with yeah, I mean, the problem with the textual issue is really there are so few people that really understand it and the complexities of it.
Hmm.
And I think honestly, more of the issue is the translation stuff that we got into with readability. And except for the missing, and okay, so Tischendorf, Tregellis, Lockman,
Yeah.
Westcott, Hort, these guys messed with the text. Origin,
Hmm.
back as far as origin, Marcion,
Hmm.
um, one of my favorite quotes, Marcion was one of the ones that messed with the text way back in Alexandria.
Yep. Yep.
And he met Polycarp one time in a meeting and he said, don't you know who I am? And
Yeah.
Polycarp said, I know who
It's the
thou art,
son of the
thou
devil. Yes.
firstborn son of
That's right.
Satan. And then
That's
I'm like,
right.
oh, well,
He's
and
getting the gloves off.
I know, right? And honestly, what's funny is I've even recently I found out that there's debate amongst the Jewish rabbis
Mm.
as to the Greek translation of the Hebrew. So you've heard the word Septuagint. Well, there was also, are you familiar with the other Greek translation of the Old Testament?
I
Uh,
know there's one out there. I haven't done
it's
studied up the Old
no,
Testament issues as much.
it's by Aquila,
Okay. Yep.
and
Yep.
Aquila did it. And Jerome said that Aquila's work was the best dictionary on the Hebrew Bible.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so I got into some of that. We don't have a full copy of Aquila's text. There's just portions of it that's been found.
Hmm.
And but
Hmm.
anyway, I was reading about the fights that the Jewish rabbis were having between the Septuagint and the and Aquila, and that was fun. And then I found out that the early church kind of embraced the Septuagint a bit
Hmm.
because it was a Greek version. They were all familiar with Greek and were not as well versed in Hebrew. So they
Right.
were enjoying that. And so you'll see a lot of that influence in some of the early church fathers, even. Um, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Hmm.
But where am I going with that? Did I even answer your question? I just
Yeah.
rambled off the track
Well,
there.
I think you did. Would you debate Mark Ward on the textual
Oh
matter?
yeah. So
Yeah.
my point is that the text issue is a very complicated
Hmm.
text, and I'm not sure honestly if a 20-minute debate or a 40-minute or hour and a half debate is really gonna yield a whole lot of fruit. I think conversations like this is what's gonna yield more fruit, honestly.
Right, right. Well, Dr. Haifley, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'm glad to have you on the channel. It was, I think it was a great discussion, and it was good to have your perspective.
Thank
But
you.
any last words? I'll open the floor. I'll give you the last word.
Oh, no, but thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be on here, and I hope we have further discussions, and I hope people will keep the conversations polite. Can I say to everyone out there that
Sure.
disagrees with this position or any other position, go back and read Matthew 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, where I think it's chapter 5, where he says, "Don't call your brother Raka."
Hmm.
That means empty-headed one. Be careful with that, and don't bully people into your position.
Hmm.
Don't make them a bully. Let people have an opinion and talk honestly and fairly about it. And I think we can all learn from it.
Amen. All right, brothers and sisters. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, we'll see you around.